You're listening to the Hypnotic Empath, and I'm your host, Robyn Holm. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, a body talk practitioner, and an empowered empath with over 2 decades of experience helping sensitive souls like you reconnect with your power. This podcast is a space for deep healing, subconscious transformation, and real-world support. We'll do some guided hypnotherapy sessions, we'll talk to some incredible guests, and we'll help you learn to release what isn't yours, to protect your energy, and to finally feel safe being you. It's time to move from surviving to thriving. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Hypnotic Empath. My name is Robyn Holm and I am your host. And I'm here with one of my favorite people, Lynsi Eastburn. Lynsi is a board-certified clinical hypnotherapist, a subconscious breakthrough expert, an intuitive empath, and a spirit baby communicator. She holds a master's degree in depth psychology and has written 3 books on hypnosis and the subconscious mind, fertility, and spirit babies. Lynsi has a global private practice and a training facility. She is the creator of Hypnofertility and has been training practitioners in this specialty since 2002. Lynsi has been connected to spirit babies for many years and has seen some miraculous happenings. She has her own TV show and on new reality TV network, Journeys Within the Journey. What's it all about? Lynsi currently lives in Colorado with her husband, Drake, her 2 rescue dogs, Radley and Pachamama.
Pachamama.
She has 2 grown sons and is also the proud grandmother of her very own pink Starlight, Teddy. The way that I know Lynsi is because I had the pleasure of working with her to conceive my own spirit babies. And she gave me so much hope and so much light and a time in my life that I was at the darkest place. And once I started working with Lynsi, it was shortly after that that I finally did conceive my first son. And then I worked with her again to conceive my daughter. It's so important. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Robyn. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for being on my show. And you've shared your story so many times. And it's just such a beautiful story. It's in my book too, right? It's in Waiting in the Wings, where you actually talk to those who are in the space where you were before you brought these 2 little wonderful babies into this world.
I read your first 2 books before I conceived, and I found them so helpful for so many reasons. I had already been working with you as a private client for about a year, and when I read the books, I was able to understand what we were doing in hypnosis. Because up until that point, I just knew that it was working and I was feeling so much better, and you were working on the underlying limiting beliefs that I had that were keeping my body from being able to conceive, because I had what we lovingly refer to as unexplained infertility. And you told me that unexplained infertility often has a subconscious root. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's, in fact, when I first started working with fertility, I heard this term, unexplained infertility. And as a hypnotherapist, I was instantly, oh, that is subconscious. That's great news. And
Yeah.
I found the people that had that did not think it was great news because they were like, well, if there was a diagnosis, we would know what to do, but there isn't. We don't. And they're basically telling us we don't know what's wrong. There's nothing we can do. And so it was like, okay, this is the missing link. And it is with so many things. And it was just so perfect for unexplained infertility. And I honestly see infertility, which, we don't use the in part for the subconscious mind. So your fertility journey, but for infertility, it just fits, and infertility using that term, but that's a symptom rather than a diagnosis to me from the subconscious standpoint. It's what brings you in. It's what brings you to the next level. So even if a person is a light worker, a healer, if they're on a spiritual path, if they haven't started a spiritual path or wherever they are in their life, this fertility issue, it is a symptom because it brings them in to do things that they may not have done otherwise. So if you just had your children and, it was no problem, no issue, you might in some ways take them for granted, and you would certainly not look into the things that are really essential, especially for these new kiddos that are coming in.
Well, and I found that the work that we did in the subconscious, the work that we did in order to help me get pregnant were the same skills that I needed in order to then parent my children. Because it would have either come up before in my fertility journey, which it did, or it would come up in my parenting journey. Either way, that call to go higher can be a really big part of that long fertility journey. And when you shared the book Waiting in the Wings, I remember after I'd already conceived my son and I was working toward my next pregnancy, you sent me some chapters to read. And there was a part about the hero's journey. Do you remember
Yeah.
that part? Of course, you didn't your book. Anyway, but it was the hero's journey and how you were talking about with these pink starlights, which I'd love to hear about in a moment. With these pink starlights, there's often this call to go higher before you can get your vibration to a point that you can even host them within your own body. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And there's so much going on right now on the planet, in the world. Everyone is aware of it. Whether you're sort of in the 5 o'clock world and not really paying any attention to the energetic or even aware of the energetic component of things, everyone is aware of it. And the pink starlights are talking about that, where we need to bring more light in. You need to be able to hold that level of light. And it's not even just the parents or the parents to be. Now it is all of us on the planet. It's a calling right now to light workers to wake up. Some of us are dormant, some of us are in various stages of our awakening or our evolution, and we're learning or we're up leveling. I end up calling it up leveling. I don't know. They seem to like that word.
I liked that word. That felt right to me. I was like, okay, there's a purpose to all this pain.
There is, and there's a purification that's going on right now. And that's it's like it's causing us to end up purifying, and then that helps purify the world, the planet, the energies, and we're really working together. So we're an extension of Earth Mother. We're an extension of all of this. So there's just so much that's going on. It's just incredible, like little pieces and puzzle pieces. The fertility journey is one of the really big parts of this.
Mm. The way that I found you way back in the day was I had read a book by Walter
I
McCutcheon. Is
call
that
it
his name?
McCutcheon. I think that's how you pronounce it.
So I found his book, which was about spirit babies. And when I read that book, I was like, yes, spirit babies is all about where are you before you're here and before you have a body here in this time, in this place. And it really helped me to connect in with the baby that I was calling in, which is my son. And I was trying to find more stuff about that. And I was working with a body talk practitioner who my son, my spirit baby, came into one of our sessions. And she was like, wow, like this was so interesting. We were able to work with him in session. And I brought her this book and I was like, I think this is what you're doing. I think you're talking to spirit babies. So then she did a bunch of internet searching and she found you. And then when she told me about you and I heard that you were a spirit baby whisperer and a hypnotherapist, I was like, that's my girl. So I reached out to you and started working with you one on one. And at that time, you called yourself the spirit baby whisperer, but hadn't yet welcomed in the connection with the pink starlight. So can you talk a bit about that transition?
Yes, yes. Well, I didn't call myself that. People called me the spirit baby whisperer because
Oh.
I had all these babies showing up. And when I first started with, doing the fertility work, the doctors were telling people, or the people that came to me, you have a 0% chance you're never going to have a baby, figure out adopting or just figure out how to be childless. And then I started working with them and babies would show up naturally, even though they were told they weren't candidates for IVF or medical care. And so people started kind of joking because, I think the dog whisperer and the horse whisperer and all these whisperers were around at that time. And yeah, but the pink starlight. So when I've been working with spirit babies for like ever, not even realizing in some ways that I was. And they started to come in, and this was another thing that started this was women would say, they told me I can't have a baby, but I know there's a baby there. And I was always like, yeah, of course. I believe you. And I say, if I were a betting woman, I would put my money on women and that knowledge and that intuition and the spirit babies anytime, every time. So, but at that time, they didn't seem to care, what kind of baby they were. And I was aware of, the indigo children, and then there was the crystal children and all of that kind of thing. I think you just encounter that over your spiritual journey. Those things just come to your awareness. So when people are first on their spiritual journey, they haven't heard of a lot of these things. And then even if they're not looking at fertility or birthing or baby related things, they still become aware of like indigo children and so forth, right? So I wasn't concerned with what they were. And it was about 2016 that they came through and said, okay, there's a group of us now coming through and you're working with us. We're working with you. We need you to get our information out there. And we're called Pink Starlights. And they chose that because pink is unconditional love. And then starlight is incredibly brilliant light, very high frequency light. And that's their thing. We're bringing in high level, high frequency love and light.
You know what's really neat about that is that I told you that I had been on a long journey. I conceived my son in 2016 after 12 years.
Isn't that
But
cool?
2016, and he is definitely a pink starlight, and that's right when they started coming in. So it's interesting when you think about timing
Mhm.
and the children that you're meant to have and the children that agree to be your kids and the ones that you choose back. I really, through my own journey, believe in all of that now. I wouldn't have believed that at the very beginning of my journey when I first started trying to get pregnant when I was 21 years old. I would have scoffed at that. And learning to get to know my son before he incarnated was what helped to give me the faith that I needed to know he was coming, because I would have given up. 12 years in, I would have given up otherwise if I wasn't so sure of him and so sure that he was coming. And you really helped me with that. You helped to bolster up my faith. You helped to bolster up my belief in him. And when I would meet with you once a month and you would say, I believe you, that was so huge. That was such a huge thing. When you think about what hypnosis is, and you would put me into hypnosis and we'd go through the group hypnosis or through the recording of the hypnosis, but it started in the intake and in the session itself, the way that you would speak to me and hold space for me. You were sure that my baby was coming in just the right time and in just the right way. I can't thank you enough for that.
Yeah, no, in the hypnotherapy world, that's hypnosis. I mean, a lot of times people think that hypnosis is where close your eyes and now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's the hypnosis, but it isn't. It's part of the hypnosis. I call it the therapeutic hypnosis, but it's what we call, waking hypnosis. It's we're connecting. Our subconscious minds are talking right now. You and I are talking, um, you know, consciously to one another, where we are and what we're doing, and questions you're asking and so forth. But we're also communicating subconsciously, and all of that is the hypnosis as well. And me, just saying, so what's happening? That's how I usually start my sessions. Hey, Robyn, so what's happening? And then
Oh, yeah.
that allows you to go wherever you need to go. And whatever you say, whatever anyone speaks about in their session is what exactly needs to happen. It's what needs to be said. And then that becomes the hypnosis. So that's worked into the, there's various techniques, of course, of hypnosis, classic hypnosis techniques that we know about. Um, that jargon, right, that they call it, right, industry jargon. Um, and then there's all of that. So it's just so much more than just and it's like if someone gets something off of YouTube or off of a recording somewhere that is not one-on-one, it's not necessarily hypnosis, and typically it's more of a guided imagery or guided meditation, and there's a big difference. So, yeah, that's really important, the part that you mentioned.
When I remember you saying to me, anything else, anything else, anything else. And I love the feeling, the way that I explain it now to my clients is it's kind of like if you have a smartphone and it has its basic settings, but then you put the apps on the phone that you want to
Mhm.
play on your phone. And that's what we're doing in these hypnosis sessions is that you're adding in the apps that you want running. And so you'd say anything else and I'd be like, "Oh, put this in for me. Anything else? How about put this in for me?" And it was so reassuring for me to know that those things were going straight into my subconscious mind and changing the patterns of how I thought about myself and my ability to conceive. Because you and I both know that after 10, 11, 12 years of negative pregnancy test after negative pregnancy test, there was a part of me that didn't even know if it was possible for me to see a positive. And so for you to put all of that in there for me was such a nurturing and supportive thing. And I knew then, because being a type A
Mhm.
perfectionist and having that unexplained infertility diagnosis, it felt like there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
But at least with hypnosis, I felt like I was doing something. I could listen to my hypnosis recording and then I was doing something, but in a very receptive and relaxed way. So it just works so well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's hypnosis as well. And a lot of times I talk about dehypnotizing people. So every one of those negative pregnancy tests is a hypnosis. It's a trance, if you will, and it compounds each time you have one. And this is where I talk a lot too with people about being around other people. You got to be careful because the subconscious mind it doesn't discern between, so-called reality, which I always have to say in air quotes, and imagination. And so if you're going through, with a friend or if you're in a group, each time one of them has a tragedy or has a failed transfer or gets a negative pregnancy test, that is also compounding what's going on for you. So there's really a lot to this that people aren't always aware of. And that's in life, as you mentioned. It's not just in fertility, it's not just in trying to get pregnant, it's in life. And these things where we might be just unable to break out of something or we keep having that same thing happening, it's because there's a hypnosis there that we aren't even aware of. And so then it kind of comes down to what is hypnosis, right?
So would you say that empaths are more susceptible to that type of hypnosis, like from other people?
Oh, empaths. We are sensitive. We are so sensitive. Absolutely. I wouldn't necessarily say more sensitive than other people because of being an empath. We're definitely more sensitive, but there's different ways that hypnosis can affect us or imprint upon us. And so repetition and that kind of thing. And cognitive dissonance. So when we're distressed over something, when things aren't going right, we just want it to be right. That's just how we are. And so anything that comes along that offers a solution, what seems to be a solution, that is a hypnosis. And we're all susceptible to that. And you can see it out there in, I call it the 5 o'clock world, right? Just the everyday world. And people are so stressed out over things that are going on or things that are not going on, and everybody's fighting. So that's causing that cognitive dissonance. And they're just looking for an answer. And sales folks know that, and marketing and politicians and everybody. So it's even that sense of create a problem, then fix it. There's your hypnosis, right? Get people stressed out, then give them a solution. And that solution is going to align with beliefs that they have, that they already have. And if those beliefs aren't healthy, it doesn't matter. The subconscious mind doesn't care if they're healthy or not. It's non-thinking. So it basically responds or reacts. And that's where we can have so much to dig into, and that why the subconscious is so important in all of this.
Mm. So then how would you recommend, and what is your method for helping empaths to protect themselves from other people's energy?
Yeah, empaths, first off, recognizing that you're an empath, that you're sensitive. I joke that I diagnose empaths and introverts because a lot of times, and empaths don't have to be introverts, but a lot of people are not aware that they're introverts and they do respond to that energy. It's a lot harsher for them. And just because you can talk doesn't mean you're an extrovert. So just because you're bubbly and outgoing and friendly and can enjoy yourself doesn't mean you're an extrovert. It's about how you recharge your energy. And the same with empaths. They often don't even know that they're suffering from someone else's mood or someone else's energy. And then as you become more aware of it, you realize, and before my father died years ago, oh my gosh, there was so much tension in that house. And I would walk in there and I would say, you could cut that tension with a knife. I was 18, 19 years old at the time, so I wasn't aware per se of being an empath, but you just could. It was, and that's the kind of thing that people are aware of maybe, but don't recognize that it's a thing, that they're empaths and they're going to have to do something to help themselves. And that bubble of protection that you talk about. In fact, I saw you talking about that on Instagram this morning. And it's that bubble of protection. Probably one of the first things that I did with you would be, I would think, which really helps. You want what you want. It's like your app analogy. You need to have what you need to have or what's good for you inside your bubble. And it's so powerful, that bubble, and it does work in the so-called real world as well as energetically. It's an energetic boundary, but incredibly powerful. There's so much just about that bubble that we could talk about.
That bubble changed my life. That's what changed my life, was because I didn't realize that I was an empath until I was about 35, because I am an extrovert. So being an extrovert, a lot of my empathic things were kind of covered up because of how much I do like to be with people, and I can recharge with certain people and not with others. But now I realize, because I was like, am I an introvert because I do like to recharge alone? But I've now figured out that I'm an extrovert and an empath. So I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people, blah, blah, blah. But I do need to recharge on my own because of my empathic abilities. It's like that clearing. And I don't need long to do that. I don't need long at all. I just need an hour, 30 minutes, even just by myself. But when I was working in Body Talk, working one-on-one with clients, I was trying all the things. I would do, showers to wash away the energy. I would do sprays. I would shake the blanket. I would have obsidian stones. It didn't matter what I did. I still took on
Yeah.
everyone's energy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started working with you and you put the bubble of protection straight into my subconscious mind, because the subconscious loves imagery and metaphor. You plugged it straight into my subconscious mind, and that worked like a hot damn. And it is literally the first thing that I do in every session that I have now as a hypnotherapist and in my Body Talk, because I seem to work almost exclusively with empaths. That's how it's worked out now
Mhm.
for me. I always put in the bubble of protection
Yeah.
first and foremost, because it makes such a massive difference. So, where did you
Yeah.
learn or discover the bubble or develop the bubble yourself?
Yeah, it does. And, introversion too, with what you say is there's a spectrum too. Like, because people tend to think of introverts as they sit in a corner, they never talk. You ask them a question, they give you a one-word answer if they give you anything. And that's not an introvert technically too. So you do see a lot of overlap too, which is kind of interesting. But that bubble, I don't even know. I've been using it for so, so long. Probably I would think when I started doing my spiritual I found a spiritual group, and I'm from Toronto originally, and I was living just outside of Toronto before I ended up getting transferred to the US, and I had got started going to a spiritual group, and I'm thinking that that might be where that energetic shields up type of thing, right? We've got to shield. I'm pretty sure that's probably where that came from, and then it was a matter of how do you perceive that or how do you connect with that? Like, is it a bubble? Is it, can literally like people who like Star Trek or whatever, like shields up, and you can imagine that you can be in sort of a of some kind of a cylinder or some kind of a container or however that works. And then, I've done a lot of work in the witchy arena, if you will, the goddess arena. And Lori Cabot's one of my favorite, the official witch of Salem, and she's a cool person. Amazing, amazing goddess being of what she's created in this world and over it's like since the 70s. So I know that just in different things that I've read, different classes I've taken, that that type of thing usually does come up in some capacity, and for me, it just ended up becoming that bubble, and I find that it's real easy to visualize or to imagine or to feel yourself in. I even use it for kids, and you can do it with kids, and they don't have to be well, kids you don't do full out inductions for kids. They don't typically sit still, if not for very long, and you do more of a kids are in their subconscious minds. I mean, the critical faculty doesn't even start to form till somewhere around 5, 6, 7 years old. And so that's as real for them as it is something else that you're doing. And so did that answer that question?
Yes, very well. Thank you. I have done the bubble with my kids and any of my child clients because they just accept it as true.
Yeah.
And I have an interesting story about this. Hopefully, this doesn't trigger anybody. I will start by saying that my daughter is good and safe and well. And she was in a stroller with my nanny. They were crossing the street in a place that should have been safe, and her stroller was hit by a truck.
Oh my.
She is fine, but she was thrown from the stroller and onto the road. And my worst nightmare, this is like my worst nightmare, of course, to get that call. When I got to the scene, the ambulance, everything came, she had only scrapes and bruises. No head injury,
Oh
no
my
spinal, nothing.
gosh.
Only scrapes and bruises. They had called in the medevac because it's a toddler who was,
Sure.
been hit by a vehicle right
Oh.
outside this a school zone. When we went to the hospital, they had the whole team waiting. And again, confirmed scrapes and bruises. That was it.
Oh, that's
So we
amazing.
talked about it afterwards. And I said to her, you had some protective angels around you. And I said, and you were in your bubble. And she said, yeah, I bounced. I was in my bubble
Oh.
and I bounced, she said. So it was really important because again, being an empath, I tend to look forward to the future and all the things that could go wrong and then try to prevent them. I'm sure you can relate. And
Yes.
one of the things that really showed me, because my biggest fear, it was my child getting hit by a vehicle when I was not present. That was literally my biggest fear. And it happened. And she is safe. We all learned from the situation. So that was really important to teach me
Mhm.
that even when bad things happen, you can still be safe within them. And that was the lesson that we took away from that, and that her bubble does work, and it works like a
Mhm.
hot damn. And when they go, like I say, remember your beautiful bubble. You're safe and protected. I say that to my kids every morning because it helps me feel better. They don't need reminding of the bubble. It's there for them at all times. But I need reminding of their bubble. And if I ever think about them in the day and I feel a little bit anxious, I reinforce the
Mhm.
bubble in my imagination. I send that out. So yeah, she bounced that day and we are so fortunate. It was not her time to go.
No,
Yeah.
for sure. And yes, this the bubble. Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. I had this client many years ago, and she had found herself on the socialite scene. And she was a kindergarten teacher, is where she'd sort of started out, or first grade, and she was just the sweetest, sweetest girl. And she ended up in a scene that was just way above anything that she was, she married into it. And it was hard because she was dealing with some very, and hate to say the word, but vicious. Some of the people that she encountered, because there's a lot of envy, or there's jealousy, or there's manipulation, or there's things. I'm not saying, I'm not categorizing everyone, but it's just very different. It was very different. And she had a woman that would just make a beeline for her every time she walked into an event. And this woman would just, and then she would just get after her. And it was all about, well, who has more wealth? And this person has more wealth. And you only have wealth because of this. And just something that I think a lot of us everyday people, that's just not even a thing. Like we wouldn't even imagine it exists. And, and she was just having such a hard time because she was just so sweet and she was empathic. I did the bubble, I put the bubble around her, and she went to the next event, and she said that woman started to come to her and then just veered right off and then didn't come near her. And so every time from then on, she would use her bubble. And of course, once you put your bubble there, it's there, but you can always reinforce it, just like you said, just if you feel stressed or if you're thinking about the kids or whatever, just reinforce that bubble, and you can put the bubble around your car and around your house. If there's a hurricane or something, definitely evacuate if you need to, but still put the bubble around your house.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard other people describe it as imagining that you're zipping up your energy like a
Mhm.
suit in the back. I had a guest that said she does Saint Germain's purple flame and imagines the flame all around
Mhm.
her. So there's lots of ways you can do it. And I think it's just acknowledging what makes sense to you so that
Yeah.
and the bubble is just what I find, as you said, the easiest. It's also just what's worked the best for me. And then I'll always get my clients to anchor it in, and what I often will just tell them to do is pick a thumb and finger together like an okay sign.
Mhm.
And then when you need reminding of your bubble, you do your anchor. And then that's going to remind your conscious mind to remind and your subconscious mind that your bubble is there and keeping you protected. And it really works so well. And now I can sit one-on-one with clients, and that's what I do mostly now is one-on-one work. I do some group as well, but mostly one-on-one, and I can do that all day and not be tired at the end of it, and I can
Yeah.
still hold space, and it doesn't take away your superpower of being able to discern what other people are feeling and sensing and being able to read the room, but it keeps you protected from taking it on as your responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, certainly the anchor trigger process is really effective. I tend to use breath anchors because then you don't
Ooh.
even have to, like, if for some reason your hands are or you can't reach them, it's the deep breath. And
Oh.
if at any time you feel any stress or tension, you might even not notice it consciously or not, your subconscious mind kicks in, you take a nice deep breath instantaneously accessing that good, positive, healthy sensation of hypnotic peace, just as you are right now, and even more so. And that is something that I do when they're in hypnosis. So it also helps them to pull in that hypnotic space or feeling or sensations, and that's, safety type of thing as well. So yeah, there's so
Mm.
many ways to do it, and anchor in the bubble, anchor in the hypnotic piece, utilize some of the things that they might encounter as well. Because a lot of
So
times, and this happens with fertility, it also happens if someone is struggling to find a partner and then they see all these people with these loving partners, or they meet somebody. And I think there's some line in, I think it's Alanis Morissette's ironic song about you meet your perfect guy and then his beautiful wife. And that in and of itself, is stressful, is a hypnosis of itself. And it's a place where it can really trigger people or stress them out. I'm never going to meet anybody, or I'm never going to have a baby, or look at those people with, that one's got a Mercedes and whatnot, and I'm never going to have that. And so using that process and that utilization of something that you see, this is another reason I ask what's going on and how do you feel and is what might trigger you, and then
mm.
let me use that so that each and every time you see, whatever, a person in a happy relationship, it positively reinforces you at the deepest levels of mind that this is there for you, that this is coming to you, rather than this is something that you don't have.
So powerful. It is, and it really is that mindset shift because you're changing it in the subconscious and then consciously you get the mindset shift, which is so helpful and so important and why I love hypnosis so much.
Yeah.
Because you can't like there's only so far that just straight up positive thinking can get you. And it is still a form of hypnosis because of the repetition, repetition, repetition. But if your subconscious mind does not believe the thing that you are trying to say in your conscious mind, it's not going to stick. You're going to go to sleep and it's going to clear overnight. So when we can use hypnosis to put in the apps that we want, then the conscious mind can do the affirmations and actually
Yeah.
believe them deeply.
Right. Well, there's that clearing that happens. And that's part of when I'm talking to people at the beginning of the session, they're releasing too. And I'll use
Oh,
the analogy of like a sink, and your sink is filled, with water. You're filling up all that stuff. You're kind of letting it go. And then you pull that plunger out and all that stuff, releases. And so what we've come also to do is to fill the sink with the positive and then release it into the subconscious mind. I don't know if I explained that well, um,
oh,
we're
great.
releasing first so that there's space.
Mm.
There's space to put it because it's like people are so full. And when they're going through something, whatever it is, that stress and that fear and that trauma and that hopelessness and whatever else, that feeling of brokenness, we've got to let some of that out. And nobody listens. So often nobody listens. If somebody says, "Well, I feel depressed," it's like, "Well, snap out of it or feel better," or, I'm upset because I can't have a baby." Well, that's God doesn't want you to have a baby, or just relax, or things like that. So that like just hits you and hits you and hits you and fills you.
Or my favorite one, "Oh, that's so weird. My husband just looked at me and I got pregnant."
Yeah,
That was my
thanks.
favorite.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks.
Great. That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff is so stressful, and it's again, it's compounding. And it doesn't even have to be the same thing to compound. Like, could be a negative pregnancy test that morning and then getting an invitation in the mail to a baby shower, and then someone making a statement like that later on. And those are compounding, and that can happen in a day, it can happen in an hour, and it can happen over your lifetime as well. So there's really a lot to deal with. So, yeah, a few affirmations. Sometimes they're just bouncing off what's already there. And whether if you believe something, whether you want to believe it or not, doesn't matter. If you do, and you're trying to change it consciously, yeah, you can do it. It takes a ton of repetition. It takes a ton of work, but when we work with hypnosis, we're able to rewire neural pathways. We're able to bypass that critical mind and create that change at the subconscious level, and then we are moving forward from there.
Mhm. It's so incredibly powerful and so effective. The other thing that I found was that by you said nobody listens. When I got to meet with you once a month to talk about this stuff, the way that you listened was so full body with no judgment. You never said the wrong thing because often people too with fertility or weight loss journeys or anything that is personal, it can be really hard to know what the right thing to say is.
Mhm.
And so sometimes people will say nothing or they'll say the wrong thing, full up say the wrong thing. And when I got to be with you in those times where you would just hold that space for that again in itself was part of that therapy, was just having that understanding place. And it's interesting because how did you end up in fertility yourself, because you did not have a fertility journey yourself?
Well, I did sort of.
Okay.
I've always loved babies since I was a little kid, and I was always concerned that people who really wanted a baby wouldn't be able to have one. And when I was 9 years old, I've told this story so many times, but I was 9 years old and I was in the back of my parents' car, and I can see it as clearly as if I'm there right now. And an announcement came on the radio and said, Louise Brown, the first test tube baby's been born in England. And they talked a little bit about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, now any woman who really wants to have a baby and truly love this baby is going to be able to have one. Phew. And I was relieved. I'm 9.
What an empath.
Right, exactly, and I just always had this thing about babies, I just always did. I had the whole mother thing too, which is that's a really big piece of so much that we deal with, be it fertility and other things that we struggle with. I'm an indigo child myself, or an indigo adult, and indigos tend to come into really tough upbringing, and so I had those one of the big things I had was my mother was the youngest of 7. And so she used to always say that the youngest had it the worst. And her statement was, the youngest got the shaft. That's how she would always say it. And she'd go on and on always. And I was the oldest. And so she very much favored my sister because she was really, had this conscious and subconscious idea that the youngest, and her mother was 40 when she had her after 7 kids, didn't want her. She definitely had, I mean, it's there, all the work that she needs to do, all the issues, I mean, it's there, but she didn't do the work, and it got projected onto me, and I was afraid to have 2 children. That if I had a second one, I was going to make that child pay, that I was going to be the oldest one gets the shaft, right? That I was going to be thinking, because she just drilled it in constantly and just treated us so differently. And then here it was, I'm the oldest, and then my mother's the youngest, my dad's the youngest, and my sister, of course, was the youngest. And so I was so aware, right? I was empathic, and I was so aware that I was terrified. I mean, I knew the cycle of violence without knowing what it was. And so people, if they become aware of it, then they have the chance of healing it. And if they don't, they repeat it. And so I was just like, I'm just going to have one child. That'll fix it. That'll work. And he's my ex husband now, but I had him have a vasectomy after my first one was born. And that was that settled, right? And then here comes about 19, so the first one was born in 89. So here comes 1992, and the spirit baby shows up. And I've always been open to this type of thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean you kind of know what you're dealing with. And he says, I'm your baby, and I'm coming, and I'm a boy, and my name is Dylan James. And I'm like, no, because I'm not having another baby, and there's a reason for that. And, all those things. And then he kept coming. He's like, okay, well, suck it up, Buttercup, because I'm coming. So I tell my ex about this, and he says, well, maybe we can get this vasectomy reversed. And so we looked into it, and we did. And then we ended up getting transferred from Canada to the US. And so that just, like, my whole life just came apart, right? I was just taken away sort of from everything that I knew. I was transferred to the Atlanta, Georgia area, the rural Georgia. So that was a culture shock, honestly. And, it just, things were just so different. So this baby was kind of on the back burner at that point, but he was still showing up. And I had to leave my spiritual group. And so I found one when I moved to Georgia. And just throughout that, I ended up getting in meditation these, what ended up becoming the 3 keys to conception. So it's interesting for me to tell this story because I have to kind of keep going backward to come forward. And then Dylan showed up. I was like, okay, it's time. I knew it that day. I'm like, it's time. And he showed up, and it was just amazing. And they all said that he was a girl. Now, this is what year was he born? This is like 1994. So they didn't have all the unless you did an amnio, which I wasn't going to risk the pregnancy just to find out if he's a boy or a girl. And so the ultrasound, they were like, "Oh, we can't really tell, but we think he's a girl. We're pretty sure he's a girl, or it's a girl." And I'm like, "No, but it's a boy." And so he'd already sent his name and, all of that stuff. So later on, I had done Reiki training at that point, and as he's coming through, so he's born a Reiki master energetically. And then I end up thinking at some point, oh, hypnosis would go along nicely with Reiki. And I was guided to move to Chicago, just like out of nowhere. It was like, you got to move to Chicago. And I basically blew up my own life and we moved to Chicago. And I knew that everything that had to fall in place would, and it did. And then I got there and I did my hypnosis training. And within the first hour, I knew that this was the direction I needed to go. Also ended up divorced and went to a hypnosis conference and met my husband, Drake. So all of these
I
things
love
that
Drake.
weren't expected. So the fertility journey is sort of not in the forefront at this point. Right. We get married, I moved to Colorado, I join his practice, and then people start showing up to ask if I can help with fertility. Well, I'm in Denver, so CCRM and Conceptions are here. And at that time, there were two of the really big, big clinics, in the US and worldwide. And so it was like there was all these things coming together, if that makes sense. So I didn't struggle with not being able to get pregnant per se. I struggled with something else that sort of contributed to that on a whole different level and also served as an awakening for me, or another level of awakening. And so, of course, when they came in and said, I've been told I'll never have a baby, I've been told I'm not a candidate for IVF, but I know there's a baby there. I said, yeah, you do. I believe you. And then
Mhm.
babies started to show up. And then I realized that I had gotten in this meditation that I had done to meet our guides. We did this session to meet our spirit guides, and it was through automatic writing, which we also learn in hypnosis training. It's another way of communicating with the subconscious. And my guide came, and to me, he shows up as a he. And all these other guides were like, they were like Seth or Ramtha or something. They're giving like, books worth of knowledge. Mine gives me one word: meditate.
Okay.
One word: meditate. And then I'm like, okay, I'm doing that, right? What else? What else? Come on. And then I get listen. And then same thing, meditate, listen. And then I get the word trust. And then I realize that these are three powerful keys, and they're the three keys to conception. They're also the three keys to life.
Wow.
And meditate doesn't have to be formal meditation, but going into the silence or shutting down the noise or taking a little time for yourself or doing some hypnosis or going to an acupuncture appointment or something like that, where you just be quiet and let spirit be able to communicate with you, or let your subconscious mind be able to direct you, right? And then we can listen better. Then we
Mhm.
can listen. And you mentioned that, and that's a huge piece, is to be able to listen and to be able to do it in a way to really hear somebody. Because so often when
Well,
we're listening, we're trying to figure out what we're going to say next, right? They're saying
mhm.
something, okay, how am I going to respond? What am I going to say? And then you're not really listening, right? And then to trust that, because I've always said, like, fear masquerades as intuition. And when we're scared, and with fertility issues, there's that time thing. And there's a lot of money involved in a lot of cases, like, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. And so there's a lot of fear. I've got to do this now. I've got to do it with this clinic. I've got to, do XYZ, and a fear of changing something. Like, I have to do this diet and I have to take these supplements and I have to see this doctor. And that might not be right. It might be right for someone, but not for you. And so then coming around, I'm like, okay, here's this three keys to conception, the three keys to life. And it became the crux of hypnofertility.
Mm. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And it has to do with that whole waking hypnosis, because coming from this journey myself, people will be like, well, she did this and she got pregnant. Oh, I have to try that. Oh, he did that and his sperm count went up. Oh, we have to try that. I literally tried everything you could imagine.
Yeah.
The craziest stuff. over that 10-year to 12-year period. And so when we started working together, and I was able to put in the bubble and bounce off other people's thoughts and opinions and emotions. And then I was able to tune in to listen to myself and listen to my baby. That was a big part. When he wanted to come was important for him and his timeline in his life. That actually wasn't up to me. I just had to be receptive and open and keep working on myself. So that listening piece and being able to listen to your own intuition again, especially for empaths, is so massive, because I believe that empaths have an even higher sense of intuition than the general populace, and they can have a harder time listening to it because they're so affected by everybody else's thoughts and fears and opinions. And that fear masquerading as intuition thing, I don't think I've ever seen that more than in a fertility journey,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there's also the part of us that is afraid that what if this never happens for me? Because it's so measurable. You're either pregnant or you're not.
Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
measurable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was so hopeful for me and for the listeners today, knowing that as you tune into your own intuition, you know the best answers for you. You have the right answers for you. And if you aren't able to tune in at this place and this time, try putting the bubble around yourself. And if you need help doing that, reach out to Lynsi or me and we can help you with that. We both have hypnosis, there's recordings, there's things that you can do that help to put that bubble in, but I do believe that you can do it for yourself. You can put your bubble
Yeah.
in for yourself. And when you're inside your bubble, you can tune down. And sometimes putting your hand over your heart and your hand over your stomach can help you drop down into your gut brain and your heart brain, so that you can really get in touch with what it is that your intuition is saying for you, because you are always right. Your true listen will always be right.
Yes. And you really can start to discern what is my intuition and what is fear. The Three Keys to Conception ended up becoming my second book. And I have an example in there that the universe gave me to just really have as an example to share. I was walking my dogs one night. It was about 10 o'clock, and we usually walk them late. And it was just me and the two dogs, but they were big dogs, 70-pound dogs. I'm just across from my house, but we had a forest preserve area there. And I'm walking through the beautiful woods and everything. And all of a sudden, I'm just absolutely certain, and I am positive Jason from Friday the 13th is just up ahead. And he's waiting.
Obviously.
He's got his chainsaw. He's there. He's waiting for me. And I'm like starting to hyperventilate practically. But my dogs aren't reacting, right? They're just like doing their thing and they're sniffing. And I'm like, okay, if some murderer is up there, whether it's Jason or otherwise, the dogs are going to be reacting. They're going to know. They will sense it way before I would have. And and I was really present with that. And I really realized, like, this is fear, because my so-called intuition was screaming at me, get out of here, get out of here. He's going to get you. And there it came from, like, just right out of nowhere. That's why I say the universe or spirit was just giving me this as an example. And needless to say, here there was no issue. And it's not to say my intuition really could have been telling me something dangerous was happening, but I need to know how to tell the difference. And so when I had that experience, now I can tell this is fear.
Mm.
This is intuition. I can really, really tell. So we want to find a way to really know it's our intuition as opposed, to fear. And fear gets really, really loud and it wants you to think it's intuition, and it can drive you absolutely insane because it's not rational either. There's a really good book called The Gift of Fear. I forget
Mm.
the author's name, and he was a former FBI agent, I think, and he worked with a lot of people who do get hurt because their intuition does tip them off and they don't listen, and women often end up doing that, or we dismiss it. We're trained to dismiss it in so many ways. So intuition is just like another huge piece.
And for me, intuition feels like a quiet check. So I'll give a really great example of how this came in recently for me. I was supposed to go pick up my son at a field trip. I wanted to get there to meet him at the field trip because he had a chiropractic appointment. I didn't want to drive all the way home. So I was like, they told me what time to be at the place to pick him up. So I knew what time that was going to be. And I came out of my appointment and I just had this little drop in into my brain going, what if they leave early? It was just that. What if they leave early? And I looked at my clock and I was like, it's still ages away. They're not going to leave early. I have time. I wanted to go get a coffee. So I was like, and then that quiet voice said, you could get a coffee after you pick him up. And I was like, "Well, no, like, that doesn't make any sense. I have to get back in the car, get out of the car. I've got my other kid with me, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure it's fine. I'll just walk to the coffee shop, which is right here, and then I'll drive over to pick him up, and I'll still be early for pickup time." Well, what do you know happened? I pulled up at the place to pick up my son, and they had left 5 minutes previously. My intuition told me that. I felt the ping of his teacher changing her mind about when they were going to leave. I felt that, but I dismissed it. And so there was a part of me that was like, stop being anxious, for goodness sake, Robyn, because I have a history of anxiety. Stop being anxious. It's fine. She told you the time that they're going to leave. But my intuition knew, and it was very quiet. There was no fear. There was no panic. It wasn't like I was afraid the school bus was going to get hit or something. It
Right,
wasn't like
right.
that, because that would be more fear, would be like, oh no, what if there was an emergency and they had to leave early? It wasn't like that. It was just a little ping of what if they leave early?
Yeah. Yes, and it's so subtle in some cases, and that's where, kind of that meditate, listen, trust, and you didn't have to be in any kind of meditation to hear it, but because you do your self-hypnosis or your meditation or your practice, whatever that is, you are able to hear it, but we're still human and able to dismiss it. And we do, and then we get a reminder, and I just said this happened on Saturday. I went to a crystal shop by me, and they do well, they sell their crystals and they do Reiki and things like that, and they have tarot readers in every once in a while, and I've been doing that lately, which is really fun. And they had the whole town, my town that I live in, did this Wizards and Wands event that was based on Harry Potter, and all those shops had different things going on. It was fun. And I'm heading out the door and I get bring tape. Like, I don't need tape. Well, I could get tape. I don't know where the tape is because we were just at Hypnothas where you were, and I had this whole, stuff. All this stuff was packed up is in the garage, and I'm like, yeah, what am I gonna need tape for? I don't need tape. And it was like, bring tape. And I did not bring tape. I needed tape. I needed tape. And it was just mobbed in there. And the shop owner, oh, he had tape, but I couldn't get near him. So and so it's
And it's
not
so perfect.
necessarily a big thing or serious or anything, but it can really just make your life go a little smoother.
But it's practice. I think we get those little drop-ins like that so we can practice knowing what true intuition feels like, so that when it's the big thing, like when I was going through my embryo transfer with my daughter,
Mhm.
this was a really big thing because my intuition told me to go ahead and do a fresh transfer. And that means you make the embryo, you transfer the embryo without freezing it. Everybody and their dog told me not to do that.
Mm,
My fertility doctor actually said, "Robyn, with your age, all of the statistics show that if you do not do a frozen transfer, you are decreasing your percentage of success by 70%." And my husband is looking at me going, "Are you insane? Why wouldn't you just freeze the embryo and do it in 2 months from now?" And I was like, "Because I know when she wants to be born, she wants to be a Leo. I know it.
yeah,
She has told me this. She wants to be a Leo." So I still had a like calmness within me, knowing that that's what she had asked for, even though even the clinic then that did the transfer
yeah,
thought I was insane, like doing this
yeah,
fresh transfer. But it did work, and she did
yeah,
get born a Leo. And so that was, again, the practice of listening to maybe the bus is gonna leave early or bring tape is what helps us build up that bank of knowledge so we know what it feels like in our nervous
yeah,
system, because everyone was trying to tell me, "Robyn, you're just rushing it. You're just rushing it. Like that, you don't wanna wait 2 months. You're just rushing it." And I had to check in to ask if that was true. I did, and I knew inside, no, she's told me when she
yeah,
wants to be born.
yeah,
That took practice, and that took 9 months of me before she even was conceived, of me getting to know her as a spirit baby.
yeah,
That helped to build up that intuition. So we're
yeah.
bumping up here. Lynsi, you and I could talk
I
all
know. I
day.
was just thinking this. I'm like, gee, Robin and I could do a whole season of
Yeah,
my show and of your podcast, and we still wouldn't be done.
that's exactly it. So I would just like to know if there's anything that you would like to empower our empathic listeners with as a final parting empowerment.
Well, you're not crazy is one, you know? Truly, accepting yourself is huge. Um, the bubble, I can't, neither Robin nor I can reinforce that enough. And then also, you're probably familiar with grounding, but there's also sort of an offshoot of it called earthing. And which in some ways may be considered the same thing depending who you are and how you refer to things, but go outside. And it doesn't matter if you don't have to live in nature. You can be in the city, you can find a little tiny piece, a tree, a little piece of grass, but touch it, like put your feet on it, sit on it, touch a tree, because it really, really helps. And they'll communicate with you. It's they're beings as well, trees and plants, and even you have plants inside your home, but be with them, and you're really connecting in with Earth Mother Earth, that grounding, that earthing that is really going to help you. Let it. You mentioned showering and this stuff, letting it go down the drain, and the same with Earth. Earth Mother can transmute it for you.
Mhm.
And so let her.
I love that. Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram, which is just Lynsi.Eastburn. And I've got a couple of websites now because I do the fertility, but I'm also doing soul healing with Lynsi, is basically what it's called, because there's just so much out there that needs to happen. And then hypnofertility.com. Oh, and
Great.
my
And I'll
show, I
link
guess, on New Reality TV.
I'll link all of that in the show notes. And where can people get your books?
They can probably most easily get them from Amazon, though we are working on making them available through Instagram.
Ooh, nice.
That'll be the electronic version, but there's the ebook and then the print book you can definitely most easily probably get on Amazon.
Yeah, and if you are on a fertility journey, and especially if you're an empath, I cannot recommend her books enough. They are so illuminating. And if you get her third book, which is Waiting in the Wings, you will see my story of my two pink starlight babies is in there. So, Lynsi, it was about a 4-year process for you to do that book, wasn't it?
Yes, 'cause
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was like a download from the Pink Starlights. And it was neat because my son was in the first portion of it, and then right before you went to publishing, I got pregnant with my daughter. I was like, you were like, do you want her to be in the book? Do you want her to be in the book? And I was like, I can't do it until the 7-week ultrasound. I need to know it's not a blighted ovum because I'd had 2 of those previously.
Mhm.
And even though I knew, I was still scared.
Sure.
I knew she was coming, but I was still scared. So as soon as the 7-week ultrasound was scheduled, I actually, as an act of faith, wrote the part that my daughter is in your book. I actually wrote it before the 7-week ultrasound as an act of faith. And here she is. It was true and it happened. And that's another big thing is living as if, right? That's another big
Yes.
hypnosis thing is
Yeah.
that future projections of like, who would I be if I was on the other side of that 7-week ultrasound? And let's write from that place.
Absolutely, and the subconscious doesn't it can't tell the difference between past, present, future. Everything's happening present. So that's why it is important to bring things that we want to create or manifest into the present time at that subconscious level. So that you were doing some hypnosis right there too.
Yep, and you taught me that. You would put and I do that with my own clients too. I always future trip them, where we'll go all the way into the future as if it's already happened, and then we'll backtrack.
Yeah,
And that's so powerful for the subconscious because then the subconscious just goes ahead and fills in the gaps. It's like, "Oh, that's already happened. So now how do we get from there to there?" And it's a really nice thing, especially on a fertility journey, to just have that faith.
for sure. And people do, when they're struggling with infertility, have a hard time sometimes. They don't want to go forward and visualize it because they're so afraid they're going to be disappointed.
Yes.
That's also the work of the subconscious mind, and as you do that, you're actually healing. It's so huge, but it's okay if you can't see it right away, just bits at a time, if you're trying to do this on your own, um, you know what I mean? Just visualize it, and you don't have to visualize because we're not all visual, but imagine it, however that is.
I'm not visual. It helped me to write it out because I'm
Mhm.
not visual at all. And the other
Yeah.
thing that I did do was make a vision board where I downloaded pictures from the internet of like a 7-week ultrasound picture. That was a big one for me because I had 2 7-week ultrasounds that ended in absolute heartbreak. So with both of my kids, I put up that a picture of a 7-week ultrasound, a healthy 7-week ultrasound, and was like, "Here's my baby." And I would look at that with my eyes every day because I'm not visual, and so I needed that kind of reinforcement. And for me, it was more about talking to myself as if it was true. And
Mhm.
I really do well with recorded hypnosis sessions because then I would just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, and repeat it.
Yeah.
And you would always future pace me. So then I was like, here I am at my 7-week ultrasound and look at that heartbeat,
Yes, and then future pace past there because you don't just wanna get to the 7-week ultrasound, so I will take the people through the milestones, right? It's that first
Yes.
ultrasound and that good strong heartbeat, and then it's the first trimester, into the second, and then it's beginning to feel a baby move, and then soon enough, you're ready to give birth, and now you're holding your baby, and then we go even further,
Yes.
because then the subconscious mind is, "Okay, been there, done that. I've already gotten pregnant, had the ultrasound, gone through the pregnancy, had a beautiful birth, and hey, my kids have gone to college and now I have grandbabies," and all of that kind of thing. So, it's huge because the subconscious you're laying a blueprint.
Mhm.
You really
Mhm.
are.
Mhm. And it's so incredibly helpful. So, Lindsay, do you still work with fertility clients one-on-one?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, so if people want to reach out to you to work with you, they can do that through your website?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Oh, that's such a gift. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and it was
Yes.
really wonderful talking with you.
Thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure. I appreciate you so much, Robyn.
Oh, and I appreciate you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on the Hypnotic Empath. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd follow the show, leave a 5-star review, or share with somebody who needs this kind of support. You can find more resources, hypnotherapy audios, and ways to work with me at robynholm.com. And don't forget, your sensitivity is not a weakness, it's a gift. Stay rooted in your power, and I'll see you next time.